today's webinar, and I hope you can all hear me, and hopefully you will see my screen in a bit. Mine is to welcome you to today's webinar, which has been a series we started beginning of the year, and today we are going to be talking about how we communicate science in Africa. My name is Grace Mwaura. I work at the African Academy of Sciences, and I'll be your moderator for today. I have three speakers with me who are quite exciting, and they'll be talking about different aspects of the work that they do in science communication. And each one of them will introduce themselves when time comes, and as well, they will make their presentations. So for today, there are a few instructions that are important for you. One is that you will remain on mute for the rest of the session. Given the high numbers that we have, we're not going to use your audio to speak. However, if you have any technical challenges, post them on the chat tab. You'll see it on your far right. If you have any questions, type them on the questions tab, and we will allocate them to the panelists who can answer you best. We won't promise to answer all the questions given the high number of attendees, but we'll try as much as possible to respond to most of the questions. So today's webinar is about principles of science communication, and I know some of you have joined because you're interested to learn how you can make your science have an impact, how you can let the world know about the great work you're doing in your laboratories, or when working with communities, or when working on policy work. Whatever kind of communication needs you might have, that's what we're going to try and handle today. We target these webinars to early career researchers, but I know some of you may just be completing your first or your second degrees, or have had several years of experience in research. So we hope it can equally benefit you. So the presenters will have 10 minutes each. They will make a presentation. We will not take questions. We'll allow other presenters to make their presentations. And after that, we'll take all the questions and have the answers at the end. So welcome very much to this webinar. I will start by introducing our first speaker for today, who is my colleague at the African Academy of Sciences. Her name is Juliet Mutheu Asengo. She's our head of communications and public relations at the African Academy of Sciences. She has a wealth of experience working in science communication, in public policy, in different institutions, regionally and continentally. Juliet, I will invite you at this point to make your presentation, and I will stop sharing my video, invite you to share yours and to share your screen. Over to you, Juliet.
Thanks, Grace, and thanks for having me today on the AS Mentoring webinar series. So I'll just pop up my screen. Let me know that you can see it.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, hi everyone. It's a bit awkward with this COVID-19 situation, because usually you would expect a response back from the big mass of people attending the webinar today. As Grace has mentioned, my name is Juliet Mutheu Asengo. I'm the head of communications and PR at the AS. I want to begin, in terms of this webinar on how to communicate science, I want to begin by telling you a story. So you will notice very quickly that my slide deck is very graphic, and at the AS really appreciate and like presentations that are graphic, have a lot of graphics and photos. So my background is in biomedical science. I'm actually a trained epidemiologist. I did a lot of research in malaria before I transitioned to the dark side, which is science communication, and which I'm super passionate about, and I really just love science communication. So as a researcher, what I found is that when I was doing a lot of field work, going into the different counties or states in Kenya to collect my data, many people would ask me, the institution I was working for at the time was Kemri Wellcome Trust, which is a Kenya Medical Research Institute, and many people were very interested, especially members of the public. What is Kemri and what does it do? And you know, there was a lot of questions in terms of the blood samples that are being collected, what do you do with them? So I found myself doing a lot of community engagement. And I mean, it was in line because even during my undergraduate days, I also was part of a radio show that was sponsored by the Australian county council. And because of that, I was super passionate about just communicating all the research work that I was studying back in the undergraduate days. So when I was doing the field work in Kenya, it was interesting to find that, I mean, even at that community level, it was not radio, but we were holding community meetings to discuss the research that we're doing. And some of the questions that we got from such settings actually informed a lot of what we were able to then end up publishing in some of the reputable scientific journals. So that's about I want to start off with this slide deck, which is on information is power, and it basically speaks to why communicate science. So let's move away from science for a second. And sorry, I'm seeing that we have a bit of an echo. So moving away from science to politics. Currently, you can't talk about anything without mentioning Black Lives Matter. It's a big trending topic. It's very pertinent. It's a huge topic, not only in the US, even in Europe, on the continent itself. If you look at the first picture I hope on your screen, it's on the left-hand side. That image, there's a clear difference between that image and the middle image. And then also subsequently, there's also a clear difference between the first image on the left and the one on the right. And you can see, even in terms of just the race, there's a lot more involvement and participation of different people across the world. The two photos on top of the AISA logo are taken in Amsterdam, the one at the top, and the other one at the bottom is taken in the UK. Of all the protests that have been happening. And what's interesting for me particularly, what resonated with these different photos that we have here is just how people were beginning to get more informed, and they're beginning to have to play a role in terms of, okay, this is not what I want to be part and partisan of. I really understand what is the current conversation, and I want to participate in the current demonstrations that are happening because I'm understanding. So information is power, because when people are better informed, then they can advocate for rights that will benefit humanity. And this also speaks to science, which is why scientists do what they do. It's to generate the knowledge, it's to inform policy making, and also inform members of the public so that they themselves can lead better lives. And if you look at the AS vision, it's actually transformed lives through science. So stories tell. And as scientists, it's very important for us to begin to tell our stories. What are we doing? And basically, this is the basis of my presentation today. So for me, there are three types of scientists. There's a regular scientist who majority of the attendees in this webinar today will be part of. Basically, you are trained to be a scientist to do your research, to publish papers, and for most, that's the achievement that they look out for. The second type of scientist is a scientist who understands and appreciates science communication and the role it plays in terms of the research that they're doing. And then the third and the last one is scientists who are communicators as well. So I had highlighted the current population that we have today, and I hope as I transition through my slide deck, you can move very rapidly from the black area through the orange to the green, and I'll be able to convince you why science communication is important and why you have to play a key role in it. So an overview of communications and what it is. This is just a quick highlight of communication strategy and key components. Grace has given us 10 minutes. It's not sufficient to be able to talk a lot about the communications that we do. I mean, give you the full-on training, but I can quickly highlight the components that it is important for you to know about. So when it comes to communication, it's very important for you to define your objectives. What is it that you want to do when you're communicating the science? Second, you need to identify your audience. Are you speaking to a policymaker? Are you speaking to a science journalist? Or are you speaking to members of the public? The third is you need to craft your communication, or what we call key messages. What are the absolute 3 key points about your research work that you want whoever your audience is to live with? And then you need to engage your partners. You need to choose the channel you want to communicate. So whether it's social media, whether it's mainstream media or traditional media, what we know of as TV or radio, whether you're going to use face-to-face meetings, conferences, events, or even community meetings that you could inform the general public on your research work. And then you choose your format, you measure your impact, and then you amplify that impact. And most of the communication personnel in your institutions, or people who you would know who are science communicators, would use this strategy, this format, for doing a lot of the communication work. And it's the basis of which it enables you to tell a powerful science story. So when it comes to choosing your channel, one of the biggest points that I wanted to highlight today, given the small time frame that we have, was on telling a good story. Like I started at the beginning, you have a story that you want to tell, so how do you package that story? And this framework gives you that sort of starting point of how you can package your story and then disseminate that to your different audiences. So why is it important to tell a story? It improves the understanding of science. It is also a good advocacy tool. It keeps the public informed. Science is equals to knowledge, captivates an audience, and then it provokes action or emotion. And those are components of a good storytelling factors. Sorry. So on to my next slide. As much as you're putting together your stories and you're thinking, what are the components, what are the key messages that I need to tell my audiences, you also need to think about what is the best channel that will allow you to reach your key audiences and then result in impact. As I said before, when it came to the channel here, one of the things we've used before has been radio and TV, but we're beginning to see a lot of usage of social media as a key component of communication. And that's why my next section of my presentation touches on the New Testament, and this is where the social media falls. So in terms of today's agenda, basically what I want you to focus on when you're telling your story is a focus around thinking and talking about science. So the science is the knowledge and the information that we're gathering as scientists. The tools is storytelling. The proof is through the communication channels, as I said before, mainstream media, social media, and then the practice is you telling your own story and being able to tell it well so that it leads to results. As you know, knowledge plus action is equals to results. We're beginning to see that very well in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement that's currently ongoing. So your future is created by what you do today. And for me, I wanted to focus on the do's and don'ts for you as African scientists. What are the things that you need to do when it comes to the area of science communication? The first one was, if you do not have a social media platform, you need to get on social media today. The conversations are not only happening on highways, in cities, they're also happening on social media. And as is the world today that we're living in, you can quickly tell that a lot of the conversations that are occurring are not in pubs or restaurants or in conferences or in meetings. They're actually on social media. We ourselves right now are on a social media platform, which is the GoToMeeting, having this webinar at the moment. The second point of my 5 science communication do's for African scientists is to be respectful of science communicators and the profession. So as a scientist, and I have been one before, it's very easy to look at science communicators as those communication people, those PR people, those marketing people, but it's actually an art. And we have different people with different forms of expertise, from the digital experts to people who know how to engage the media very well, people who know how to engage policymakers and lead into impact in terms of developing policies that are informed by your research work. So it's very important to be respectful to those science communicators. The third one is allocating funding to communication. So when you write your proposals, it's always very important to carve out a section where you can budget for communication. And the good thing is we are seeing a lot of our funders really beginning to get interested in funding science communication. So when you put together your proposal, it's very important to also put aside some money and also some time or resources, whether it's personnel or financial, to be able to cover that time for communication. The fourth point is do maximize on your comms department, because they also have the ability to let you be visible and to shine to the different audiences. You might be engaging with policymakers more often than not, but your science communicators enable you to I've just seen Grace. I have to hurry up. Yeah, your science communicators enable you to communicate with the public that you might not necessarily engage with. And then the fifth and last point is do engage with the media, engage with policymakers, and engage with your community. Grace, I'm wrapping up. The next one is 5 science communication don'ts for African scientists. Do not ignore your local reporters over international reporters. We've tend to see that sometimes scientists will receive a request from a reporter from the BBC, and here in Kenya we have our local media like KTN, and our scientists sometimes do prioritize international media. Please do not ignore your local, because they also understand the context in which you work on. Second, do not use jargon. Hemoglobin is still hemoglobin. You can explain it out, but don't dumb down the science. Don't feel like you have to have 30 years of experience to talk about your work. My very first interview was when I was an undergraduate at the BBC. Don't overthink or over-explain. Keep it simple, really, really simple. Just think about the audience you want to engage with, and don't be too busy to engage. Don't say, you know, I have my samples in the lab and I can't engage. Let's do it tomorrow. When you get the opportunity, grab it by all means. And then my last comment, Grace, sorry, 1 minute, is in terms of the 7 rules of science storytelling. It's still part of science communication. Is remember, always know the audience, the people you're speaking to. Let go the ego. Titles don't matter, knowledge does. So share it freely and widely. Less is more. A good story sticks. So be able to tell that good, memorable story. Make it useful. Humor always goes a long way. It engages the mind and the heart. And then tell a tale. You know, we know the story about Adam. We know what happened with Isaac Newton and gravity. And now we know about Steve Jobs, as I'm sure most of you are on Apple computers at the moment. And then I just wanted to quickly show you my team, the team we have at the AAS, who are very keen to support science communication across the continent. So if you're a scientist on the continent and need support in terms of science communication, we're all here to help you and to facilitate that. On top of that, we work with a vibrant team of science communicators. We're not alone. I'm sure for some of you, it must be the first time you've heard of science communicators as communication as a profession. So we have a vibrant team of other peers across the continent, in Africa and in Asia, that we work very closely with. So I hope I've managed to convince you to move from being just a regular scientist all the way to a scientist who is a communicator. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you very much, Juliet, for your presentation and attempting to keep time. We'll move on without taking questions for now. We will move on to Vivian, whom I'm going to share the screen with so that she can show us her slides. And I would like to introduce Vivian, someone whom I've known for quite a number of years now. I think in my first job back in 2010, we worked together. She is a science communicator just like Juliet. We have worked together in CGIAR institutions where she's still working. And she's going to talk to us about communication for development, particularly the work that she's doing with International Potato Center. So Vivian, over to you, and you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Grace. Please confirm that you can see my screen and my video as well.
Yes, I can see your screen, but I can't see your video yet.
Is it there?
Yes, I can see your video. Good to go.
Okay. Thank you, Grace, very much. And I'm going to build on Juliet's presentation, where she has basically introduced us to science communication and has told us on why we need to focus more on communicating our research. So maybe just to introduce myself. Okay. So Vivian is a development communication specialist. I have over 10 years of experience working in Africa and beyond. And I've basically been supporting researchers and scientists in various countries. And my skills are mostly around the development and the implementation of communication strategies and messaging on topics such as agriculture, food security, climate change, education, and health. And currently, I work for the International Potato Center, abbreviated as CIP. CIP is one of the 15 CGIAR research centers. So it's a group of various research centers looking at various issues. And you're free to engage with me via my Twitter handle on @VNarea. So for today, as I said, we are going to discuss how to leverage communications for greater impact of our research. And what I want to do is I'll focus my sharing on practical research that has been conducted at the International Potato Center, where I currently work, and also at other places that I had worked also within the CG system. So first of all, as Juliet has said, what is the problem that we have? So the problem is that we are researching, yes, there's a lot happening, but you know that our research is not visible. No one knows what is going on. In fact, there are so many PhDs today, but very little impact. And as my supervisor would always say, a journal paper that has been read by nobody does not exist. So if as a researcher, you have spent the last 2 years, 3 years researching about a particular topic, why not spend some extra time? In fact, why not be deliberate about it at the very beginning while you're planning your research, and decide that I'm going to dedicate maybe the other 50% of this research towards sharing the findings? Because we find that more and more funders want us to demonstrate impact for our work. You know, even at such a time like now, we can't ignore, everyone is looking to scientists. At the International Potato Center where I work, you will find the scientists still coming to work because they have experiments that are running in the lab. So you see, science is really essential, and that is why we have to share and communicate about our work to a broader audience. But given the amount of information that exists out there, how then are we supposed to make sure that other people, you know, given the information that is out there, how do we ensure that they're able to choose our research over what the other stuff that exists out there? So as I said, I work for the International Potato Center, and I'm going to base this sharing on what we've done, our work on the orange-fleshed sweet potato in Africa. This is work that has been done by one of our researchers. When she joined SIP, it was in the 1990s. You'll see there's the first one, the 1991, where she had that innovative idea of using orange-fleshed sweet potato to help alleviate vitamin A deficiency among children under 5. And as she was doing her postdoc in the 90s, she found that countries are wasting a lot of resources, and it's going on to date, because when we go to the clinics, the young mothers who might be in the session, your children, at least in Africa, they're going to give you vitamin A capsules every 6 months for your baby. But that is not sustainable. It is very expensive. So this was the work of Dr. Jan Low, and Dr. Jan Low found that through use of orange-fleshed sweet potato, which communities were already growing, if we can start promoting the biofortified variety, then you will find that we are able to find a solution to this problem and solve countries a lot of money. So you will find that as a result of the work by Dr. Jan Low, which began in the early 90s, in the 2016, she and her colleagues were awarded the 2016 World Food Prize for that research that she did. And to date, as of this year, you find that orange-fleshed sweet potato has improved the nutritional status of at least 6.5 million households. Almost 30 million families in Africa and Asia are growing and consuming the sweet potato. So what I wanted us to do is, how did she achieve this much impact? You know, at the beginning as a postdoc, she had that idea and she wanted to sell that idea to various people. And we'll look at what happened. The second case study that I'm going to draw lessons from is from this work that is being done by a research program of the CGIAR, the Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security Program, where they are engaging the Africa group of negotiators. There's an expert group that every day meets within the framework of the annual climate change meetings. So this group of people were looking for evidence on the impacts of climate change in Kenya and in Africa. So what these researchers decided was that, you know, they could help these experts to build the evidence base. And you find that as a result of this support by the researchers, you find that Kenya, just one of the many countries that are working on this, they were able to integrate climate smart agriculture into their nationally determined contributions. So you see, this is impact. What Janlo was able to achieve with her colleagues, that's impact. And what this group was able to achieve, this is impact at the policy level, because this is a country that is being deliberate about having climate smart agriculture in its framework. So let's look at how we can get people to use our research so that we can be able to achieve impact. So first of all, you need to ask yourself as a researcher, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And each of the problems that you're trying to solve, what is the bigger picture? Now we have the Sustainable Development Goals. So if you look at your research, look at the bigger picture. Which goal are you trying to address? Because when you look at the bigger picture, you're able to find additional channels to be able to promote your work. You need to ask yourself, as Juliet had asked, who is my target audience? You know, policymakers are important because they will help to take your idea to scale. Donors are important because they will fund your work. Researchers, other researchers, apart from yourself, they need to know what you're doing because they are helping to build the evidence base. We have NGOs who will help you to reach other partners and other farmers. For our case, they help us to reach the people on the ground. And how do you reach them? You need to think about messaging. You need to think about how are they going to be able to understand your work, your research. And that is the power of dissemination. Okay, so what are the opportunities to get your work out there? You see, just like Juliet said, there's a number of ways you can get out there. At the International Potato Center and within the CG, what we do, from just one journal article, we are able to dissect it into different chewable, it could be a publication, it could be a product. You have the journal article that has been published, but you need to drive people to your journal article. You need to write a blog. We write a blog in a more simpler language, and just trying to explain the science, the research. For the case of the International Potato Center, for the case of Dr. Jan Low, she set up the Sweet Potato Knowledge Portal to continue to share more information about her work. And for the other one that was influencing policy in Kenya, there's the Climate and Agriculture Network for Africa. You see, these are platforms that exist that can give scientists working within that area additional channels to be able to reach out to other people. So like the Climate and Agriculture Network for Africa, they host discussion forums, and they're always looking out for evidence around different topics. So as an early career researcher, I would look out for the various relevant websites that exist, the platforms that exist, that you can be able to add your voice onto. Then we have the regional and international events. These are very crucial. And if you think of the broader picture you're trying to solve, then if you're on social media, you're able to ride on the hashtags in these events. You're able to talk to people about your work using the hashtags. You can see down here that we were able to reach out to the then Minister for Environment just by sharing about our work on climate change. And she came in and shared it. So people like Professor Judy, whom you see the tweet, these are the people we call enablers. They are influencers. If they're able to retweet or even share your work, you're able to reach a much broader audience. Then we have podcasts. You can also explore podcasts and look at what exists within your target area. Are you able to reach out to the people who are operating those podcasts to be able to maybe have one-on-one interviews? People are always looking for additional information to share, so you can always exploit those ones. And then I mentioned that with each journal article, we are able to divide it into 3 and produce different publications from one journal article. So from one, depending on who the target will be, we can write a research brief. A research brief is just a 2-pager or a 1-pager, and you are directing your findings to other researchers. An extension brief will help you to reach out to maybe people on the ground. It could be agricultural extension officers if you are working in agriculture. Then we have policy briefs that can help you to reach policymakers. Other than that, how you present your research is very important. What we do is that we make use of infographics, and Juliet alluded to this also, because people are able to get information. If you are to present this infographic on nutrition to various policymakers, at a glance, they're able to see what you're talking about. And so the initial idea is to capture people's attention so that they are able to seek for more information from you. This is just another example of an infographic from the work of the International Potato Center, where we are just telling people about this technology of storing sweet potatoes so that communities can have a planting material. And you're able to take your audience and show them why they really need to pay attention. So it's almost like you're teasing people and they would want to find more information, and that is why they will go and look for your journal article. I'm just winding up. This is my last slide. At the end of it all, I found this online while I was preparing for this presentation. And you see that you have one journal article, but from it, how are you able to look at the blue part? There's the knowledge, the evidence. So how are you able to make sure that people discover your paper? You need to have them discover it. You need to have them connect. You need to convince them, and you need to advocate. You see, when you use all these strategies that I've highlighted, then you are able to direct people to download your paper. And when you engage in conversations, you are able to sell yourself as someone who has the evidence that people are looking for. And I think from that, you are able to be invited into forums, into events where you can speak and further amplify the content of your work. So that is what I had to share with you today. And what I wanted to say is that since you spend a lot of time writing that paper, equally spend a lot of time making sure that people are able to access your paper and use it. So that is what I had to share. And thank you for listening to me.
Wow, thank you very much, Vivian, for your presentation and very beautiful slides. You and Juliet have really fantastic work, and participants have asked if they can receive them. We have a third speaker, Emmanuel, and I would like to test whether his audio is now working. Emmanuel, if you can hear me, could you kindly try and speak so that we can know if your audio is working? Emmanuel, can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. I'll make you the presenter, the presenter now. So do you have your slides open, Emmanuel? Or would you like me to show your slides?
Yeah, I prefer you share my slide because I have some comment close and I don't want people see them.
Okay, Emmanuel, over to you. I'm sharing your slide in a minute and you can start speaking. Over to you, Emmanuel. Please make your presentation.
Okay. So, may I start now?
Yes, please. You can start. Confirm you can see the slides?
Okay. Yes, I see. You can put it in presenter mode. Good. Okay. So, hello everyone. My name is Emmanuel Dabo from Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast. And my talk will be focusing on the personal strategy, communication strategy, the personal branding for you as a scientist. And I'm going to share with you some tips, some tools that you can use to position yourself as effective communicators. So next.
Emmanuel, you also have the right to change the slides, but please go ahead.
Okay, good. So the objective of my presentation, as I say at once, is to share with you tools and tips to develop your personal branding and value yourself. So, okay. Personal branding is a self-promotion of your image, competency, and value. You have the benefit of personal branding, as you can see, visibility, positive impression, the possibility to develop a real leadership. And when I say be easily identified, is the idea that how when they think about a specific issue, the name of somebody comes directly into the mind. For instance, if I say research about mental health in Africa, who do you see? When I say capacity building in One Health in Africa, who do you see? And to assess your personal branding, the first things you have to do is to check your name on Google, because it's the most popular search engine in the world. And you have the possibility to also receive, to be alerted each time your name appear on a website, uh, a specific keywords you want to follow. For that, you have to subscribe to Google Alerts. It's an easy tool. You can connect with your email. Hello.
Emmanuel, you may continue.
Okay. So if there is some problem, you can switch to me so that I can directly share my screen. Because I think I have some problem to change the slide. Okay, good. So as I said, when you identify your positioning on Google, on the web, you have the possibility now to improve the situation if you notice that the results are really bad for you and there is a wrong impression on you on the web. And for that, you need to have a strategy. I think Juliet has already presented some the main step of the strategy of the communication strategy. I cannot speak again about it, but you can see the main points. But I want to show you an easier method designed for non-communication specialists, and I call it the GTB method. Get to by get. It's the answer of the question: who is your target group? Define which people you want to reach. Two, what do you want this target group to do? Define the goal you want to reach. By how are you going to get your target group to do what you want them to do? Define which action you are going to take to reach your goal. And you can do this exercise, an exercise as a as you can see the example I show you. Get in touch with scientific online community to strengthen my network and develop new partnerships by participating in regular tweet chat with the hashtag PhD Life. You can do this exercise to set up your communication goal and also communication strategy. Next. Okay, but because of time constraint, I cannot talk about several tools. I will be focusing on Twitter because there are a lot of scientific evidence that show the contribution of Twitter in the personal communication of the scientist, in the positioning of the scientist, and also in the visibility of scientific publication, as you can see in this on the screen. And one thing I can say, Twitter provides a large virtual department of colleagues that can help you to rapidly generate, share, and refine your idea. It can be used as an informal arena for the pre-review of work progress, but also to communicate research to a broad audience and to amplify scientific and social impact of publication. Previews.
Emmanuel, I have given you rights. You may also be able to change your slides on your side,
Okay.
please. Yes.
Okay. Stop there. And in addition to the scientific role, if I can say that way, of Twitter, it can be also a great tool when you attend to a conference to take notes, to report thoughts, share information, but also to build and engage network. Other tools rapidly because of time constraint, the BioSketch. Please write a short text about you, about your progress, about your research, and you must share this text with your colleague, with your family, your children. If your children are able to repeat this text when somebody asks to your children, for instance, oh, who is your father and what's the job of your father? If your children is able to say, oh, my father is a scientist working on that, it's a good point. That means you are able to translate your research in a non-academic language. And imagine, for instance, you meet Bill Gates in the elevator. You have just 60 seconds to spend together, and he asks you, who are you and what do you do? The text must be ready. You have to keep it in your mind so that you can easily introduce yourself. In addition, you have the email signature, the institution website, and on some institution website, there are some web page dedicated to the introduction of the scientist. Please provide to your communication officer with good text, good bio sketch about you, and also a beautiful picture. If you are not on the institutional website, it's not you are not credible when you say I belong to this institution. You can also publish some blog posts on your own, or submit also some contribution to a specific blog you want to contribute on, or also submit a contribution to a media, a journal, or I think AAS also received some op-ed, some contribution from scientists. Juliet, we talk something about that. We have also ResearchGate, social media focus on science, on sharing article collaboration within between scientists and then. Next, try to move. Okay, so the type of content you can share, because I talked about the tool, but it's important to look at the contents, because it's what is important. It's what will give you value. And the idea, the type of content you can share, it's mainly your work, previous work already published. I insist on that. Ongoing research project or project to come, information about your career, public debate about your research field, share your publication and presentation, explain your research, and also share what you learn. Some tips, I think it's we are moving to the hands, hoping that Grace will not rush me. Think before
I'm about to switch on my video.
think before you post, and because your post will engage you. So think clearly before you post, and be patient, because personal branding, personal development is not something you can plan as a short-term goal. It's long-term goal. Be aligned with the communication policy of your institution, please. That is really important. Follow the science communication process. You see the picture on the left side. There are two areas, actually three, and what you share with media, what you share with journalists, with non-scientist public, it's something that has been validated by a by a scientific community. Success story. It's two things I want to share with you to present how Twitter has been useful for somebody and can be also useful for you. On the picture, you see l'Appel d'Abidjan. It was a conference, a meeting that was scientists emerging of the African Union and European Union summit held in 2017 in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. And the director of Afrique One shared some tweet about the event. And the lady in the comment named Linda Noling, who is a journalist based in South Africa, tweet, what is happening there? And we answer, oh, this is what is happening. It's a call for scientists to convince policymakers to invest in research in Africa. And we provide with more information by email. And the day after she published the article, you can see by sharing also our thought, our vision about this event. The next slide is about my personal success story. Always with Twitter. Yes, Grace, you can go to the next slide, please.
Emmanuel, you have the rights, and I'll ask you to finish in the next 30 seconds, please.
Yeah. So the first picture, the picture on the left side, is a tweet I made after reading a book. The pic is about the book I read, and I share what I learned, what I understood from this book by tagging the author of the book. And they tweet after to say, oh, I'm really happy to see you, somebody in Africa, Ivory Coast, read my book. And we engage a conversation about the topic about the issue developed in the book. And by this way, we start a sort of collaboration. The next is the final slide, and we are okay. And I will be opening to discussion, to question. Okay, so my last message for you who are attending this webinar, please take control of your communication by using communication channel at hand. Sometimes when we think about communication, we see TV, we see radio, but nowadays we have a lot of communication channel like Twitter, like the blog, and within your institution, there is also some classic, I can say classic communication channel you can use to position yourself, but please always rely on scientific evidence and also on institutional progress. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel, for your presentation. We are glad that you are able to join us despite the technical issues we had earlier on. And thank you everyone who has joined us for today's webinar. At some point we had over 200 attendees, and I'm really glad this webinar attracted such an audience. I don't want to recap what every presenter has talked about, but for me, my highlights were when Juliet talked about telling your story, because I think that's the most important thing when we think of science communication, we're always thinking about how do I turn hemoglobin to something that people can understand. When you start thinking about it, how can I tell this story to a layman? How can I tell people about what I do, how important it is in a very simple language? Then you start looking for avenues for you to do that. Then Vivian started talking about what impact you intend to have with the work that you are doing, and then knowing how best to package that piece of work in that way so that you can actually start having impact on the continent. She also emphasized the importance of visuals. She had several visuals and graphics from part of the work that is happening at SIP, and I thought that was really encouraging. And Emmanuel has focused more on our personal branding, what you can do at an individual level, how you get known out there, how you can engage a community, whether scientific or otherwise, on Twitter, for example, and even having a pitch whereby if you are on a lift or on an escalator within a minute or 30 seconds, you can share about the work that you do very efficiently. So what I will do now, we're going to take questions and answers. And I'm going to invite Juliet and Vivian to come over on the screen again. If you want, you can share your screen, or you can still just use your audio. I will take the questions that we have, and to start with, I'll start with a list of questions we normally receive from participants when they are registering. I will read a question and direct it to one of you, and then you will respond to that question. So the first question, just give me a minute. The first question, I'll take it to you, Juliet. What steps can a researcher follow to identify the most suitable communications tools for sharing research outputs? What steps can one follow to identify the most suitable communications tools for sharing research outputs? Over to you, Juliet.
So I'm very glad, and you know, it's funny when my peers were sharing their presentations, because we didn't do a run through all of us. It was really comforting to know that we were all speaking on the same, we're all on the same page and speaking from the same point. And I say this because Emmanuel's repeated again the communication strategy. So if you're to think about the steps of identifying which is your best form of communication, it's always important to just quickly browse through the communication strategy. And the key component of that strategy is actually your audience, because it is your audience that will define what is the best channel of communication that you can use. Vivian really touched well. I loved the graphics. I'm such a vivid lover of infographics and all sorts of graphics, because anyone from a high school student, primary school student, right up to an adult will understand graphics very quickly. And if you look at certain institutions like governments, for example, they tend to use a lot of graphics to communicate their work. So for me, I think it's not even as much as the steps, because the steps sit with the communication strategy, but it's usually the audiences that will determine which is the best channel for you to communicate with. I mean, and then also the situation, I might as well add it there. Our current situation has meant that social media platforms are a good sort of pathway for communicating with our audiences. Grace?
Thank you very much, Juliet. My next question will go to you, Vivian. And the question reads, kindly share what has worked and what has not worked in your science career communication field, or in the science communication field.
Well, thank you for that question, Grace. I am still at that point of trying to, you know, the question of hemoglobin. At times when you're working with researchers, they don't want you, they call it oversimplifying research, you know? So where they want you to use that term, yet you know, you can always say it in another way and people can understand. So I'm still trying to get to that level where, for example, instead of talking about beta carotene for our vitamin A, for our orange flesh sweet potatoes, we can just talk about the precursor to vitamin A. You know, you don't have to say like you don't have to mention the technical term. It doesn't really water down your research. what we as communicators are doing, we are basically just mediating understanding. We are looking at the various audiences. Believe me, if we were going to do a research brief, which I had said that is going to target other researchers, we will use that term in that research brief because we know the audience that we are going to talk to. But if we're going to talk to, if I'm working on an extension brief that I want to distribute to farmers on the ground on why they should plant the sweet potatoes, then I will definitely use vitamin A, you know. And then otherwise, what has worked in my career is, at least within the CG, more and more we are having our work influence the policy processes, as I had shared initially. So during events, what has worked very well in terms of promoting our research is that we are able to work with our scientists and to be able to look at how can we maximize the participation of different players in this event. Remember, some events will have policymakers, some events will have other researchers, but we've always been able to work together to be able to dissect that journal paper into different communication products depending on the audiences that we are going to meet. So that has really worked well.
Thank you very much, Vivian, for that. The next question goes to you, Emmanuel. And the question goes, how can you efficiently engage the public in your research using platforms such as blogs? How can you efficiently engage the public in your research using platforms such as blogs? Over to you, Emmanuel.
Okay, it's a nice question because blog is really used in terms of importance. A lot of people use it, and one thing I can say, you can use the blog to convince people, the policymaker, but also colleague scientists. In this, there is the aspect in scientific publication, we only publish good results. It's very scary to present bad results, and you can use your blog to say, I tried to do this, but I didn't got the positive result. This is what's wrong, so that another one can see, read it, and avoid to duplicate the same research, and we save time. Writing also for a blog, you can use a very relaxed style, because you are not, there is not the constraint of the review. You read as you feel with your words, and you are free to determine the tone, the slide, etc. And you can directly also comment with people. Another point, if you as scientists, you have a blog, you can have a specific page that presents yourself. Be sure you will receive some email from people, journalists, I don't know, a lot of people to say, oh, I want to collaborate with you. I want to get more information about that. Since 2014, I have a blog because I study the blog ecosystem here in Ivory Coast for my master thesis. And we are now at more than 6 years. I have a blog, but I still receive some comments, some intention of collaboration, and by the partnership, you can continue to push some idea.
Thanks very much, Emmanuel. The next question to you, Juliet. Now I'll take 3 questions from the audience who are typing in. This one is from Chu Donatas Iwe. He or she is asking this question. As a researcher, is it advisable to dedicate time to acquire communication skills or leave everything for the media? Over to you, Juliet.
As a researcher, is it, what was that?
Is it advisable to dedicate time to acquire communication skills, or should you leave everything for the media, let's say the media or the experts, the communication experts? Yeah.
It's advisable to leave some time out to be able to communicate. And by saying this, I'll sound like I'm contradicting myself. So let me say it also that at the same time, you do have to have the professionals, the science communicators, public engagement personnel, policy engagement, media engagement officers who day to day, literally, it is their work to run after the journalists. But, the reason why I say it's important for scientists to set aside time to engage the media is because sometimes we get the slots from the media houses for a specific scientists to come in and be able to be interviewed, about their findings. So I'll give you a good example. Right now, there's a program in Ghana that we fund, the WACBIB program. And one of the scientists there, they did, they sequenced, I saw this through Twitter, they sequenced the coronavirus genome. Imagine a scientist like that. That's huge in this day and age. So when I get a slot, say on a local Ghanaian TV for the scientist to come on board, if I call the scientist, I would expect that the scientist would say, "Of course, I'm coming," because they're allocating the time. But at the same time, we're not saying that the scientists need to become trained science communicators. I know if you saw my slide deck, I had the 3 types of scientists: the scientists themselves, the one who understands and appreciates science communicator, and then a scientist who's a good communicator. That's what we want them to be a good communicator, to be able to develop a blog that then Emmanuel reviews and says, "Oh, this is a nice blog, but maybe change this word a little bit to be, palatable and easily understandable by the person who's reading it, depending on who your target audience is." So I really encourage, and I did say one of the do's is that it's very important for scientists to even begin to allocate funding. And I talked about resources, and the resources is just not about money, it's also about the personnel time to be able to communicate the science. It's very, very important.
Thanks very much, Juliet, for that, and for emphasizing the issue of resources, because without resources, you can't achieve the communication you desire. Vivian, this is for you. It's from Nadir Hashim. She says, "Thank you very much for your enlightening presentations. Science is essential for development. However, in most cases, interesting events in science receive little or no attention in our mainstream media, locally or regionally. What could be the problem? Do we lack science communicators?" Over to you, Vivian.
Thank you for that question. I don't think we lack good science communicators. I mean, I'm here. What is she saying? Anyway, Juliet is here, Emmanuel is here. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that during those events, what we need to do is probably we are missing on the messaging bit during such events. Remember, I was also talking about how do you link your research to the bigger problems? What is the world concerned about right now? Okay, we have COVID, but maybe can you ride on this to talk about maybe the role of nutrition, or maybe when we have other events like I think there'll be the Food Systems Summit next year. So you see, there's that bigger event that's happening, but from your research, how can you link it? How can you link it to the bigger problem that exists out there? Because the journalists, they basically want something that sells. So before you receive your coverage, you have to tell them exactly why they should care about your work. And that is why working with communicators, working with different people can be able to really ensure that our research is out there in terms of, when you package your research in a nice way. Look at the statistics on maybe the reach. Who are the people that you're targeting? How is that smallholder farmer on the ground going to benefit? Or, for example, when we talk about our sweet potato, we are looking at what are the other opportunities that could exist from this crop. there's a way you can package that information and say, you know, you don't have to eat that sweet potato when it's raw, when it's boiled, but maybe we can have bakeries have it in their bread, you know. So there's a different way of framing your message, just depending on the bigger problem that is out there. So that's what I would say. Messaging is key. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yes, Juliet, please.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step in, but I really like that question. You know, is there not sufficient science communicators? I think the issue is not even having insufficient science communicators. If you look at our media and how they like to cover stories, you know, politics gets a lot of coverage. I mean, up the ladder, it will probably be politics and then sports and then religion, interestingly enough, and then science is right down at the base. And it's not only to do with science communicators, I think even the scientists themselves, it's very important that our scientists be able to communicate to the media and engage them. And then at the same time, I mean, for the AS, as much as we talk about building a critical mass of African scientists on the continent, we're also talking about building a critical mass of science journalists who can write good stories, because it only takes one scientist to speak to a science journalist, and for the science journalist to write that story that's not factual, is inaccurate, and that's it. That scientist will never ever speak to the media again. So it's very important to do both. You know, train the scientists, train the science journalists. In the middle is the middlemen, the Vivians, the Juliets, the Emmanuels, and for us to make sure that everybody is happy and the media is receiving the information that they need to receive to disseminate it widely.
Thanks very much, Juliet. Trying to see whom to allocate the next question because they're quite heavy. Let's go with this one for Emmanuel. Who judges if one is a science communicator or not? Any association one can get membership to claim is a science communicator? Over to you, Emmanuel.
So thank you for this question, and I want to link this question with the previous one. In addition with what Vivian and also Juliet said, the big lack is media focus in science, is science journalists, and that's why I support and I create the program of AES to boost the number of science journalists. And there is also a trend on TV show, radio show, to invite people who are very active on internet, who have a lot of follower, and then maybe it's because of audience and also getting more advertising. But I think it's also a way to explore for a scientist. If I am, as a scientist, I'm really active on internet with a lot of followers, it's possible that I can be invited on a TV show. And from this moment, I can share myself with journalists and a lot of people. And I think, as I say, scientists must take the control of the communication. A lot of, not a few number of journalists will go to scientists to say, hey, I want to know something about. It's very rare. So as how can we know if I'm a good science communicator or not? Based on my experience, I can say it depends of your personal goal you set. In opposite with Juliet, I don't have a scientific background that I left to become a communicator. I only study communication, and I discovered a field called science communication, and it was really enthusiastic. And I say, oh, I can do something here, something which is really impactful. And I define my personal goal. After some discussion with the director of the program and also some scientists to identify the gap, and after set a strategy to overcome this gap in terms of communication. And I can say today I'm happy because a lot of the colleagues, scientists with whom I work today are able to share to use Twitter, to use social media. And during the event last, like Deltas Africa, Juliet can testify, most of the scientists tweet, make a lot of things about in terms of communication. That is one thing that makes me happy. And yeah, to answer to the question, this is what I can say. Basic of what you observe, what you see, the gap, set a strategy, and at the end, analyze, assess the impact, and you will see if you are a good or a bad one.
Thanks very much, Emmanuel. And especially for talking about your career, because we had two attendees asking whether science communication is actually a career. So you have also addressed that question. I want to read a comment for the three of you that came from Aminata Kone. And she's saying, I've long been thinking that science communication is just about publishing and presenting at big conferences. So I think you have helped scientists to start realizing actually it's much more than just publishing and presenting your work. Vivian, let me pose this question to you. It's from Aston Chipanshi. Some of the tools discussed can be overwhelming. In some situations, a scientist does not have the luxury or the time to be answering Twitter and other social media generated questions. I have, for example, received, it's quite a long one. I have, for example, received requests for data papers which are freely available in open source journals. For example, our policy is that information is discoverable online. We do not open discussions with information seekers. I think that would make a very exciting conversation. Over to you, Vivian, or anyone else who wants to respond to that.
Yes, I would be interested to know if he has the statistics. Well, he said that the information is open access, meaning anyone can search for it, and but how much information is out there? We are talking about being competitive and demonstrating the impact of your work. So as a researcher, I think you have to be very deliberate if really you want to showcase the impact and to show that to look at the downloads for your paper and then to drive the downloads back towards maybe impact on the ground. So I think the fact that it's open access doesn't necessarily mean that it is being accessed or that it is being used. So my view, all these methods that we are discussing here, the blog, social media, you are trying to drive a certain audience towards your research. And to do that, you are just trying to provide little snippets of information from your research. But even as you write your blog, within the blog, you are going to embed your paper in the blog. If it's social media, Twitter, it will only support so much characters. So you will put a link to your paper. And I think as you do that, the good thing is that are you able to showcase the impact of your research? There are many tools that are available. Within the CG, we try to use a tool called Almetrics to sort of track the downloads for the research or the paper that we're having. So the good thing, you're able to see, and what I'm saying is that just by using that tool, Almetrics, you're able to see how did people arrive to my paper. So some, we are seeing that it was through social media. It's able to provide that channel that, well, someone came from the SIP, someone came from Twitter, went to the SIP website and read your blog, and then downloaded your paper. So if you're able to showcase that, I think the better. But if this particular scientist is contented with the use or the statistics that they're getting just by the paper being open access, then I wouldn't want to add anything. But other than that, he said they're very busy, and I wanted to say that that is why we are here to help. We don't expect them to do all the work. Even I can tell you the infographics you just saw, I didn't produce them. I was just looking at the messaging, and we are able to work with our graphics team to just be able to ensure that that information can be able to help someone to be easily understood. So that's what I would say. It's all about working with different people, working with other people who are there at your disposal to sell your work.
That's such a good point, Vivian. Sorry, Grace, I hope you don't mind me jumping in. But, you know, I like the comment from one of the participants or attendees when she said, you know, oh, wow, I didn't realize science communication is actually a profession. And it's because, I mean, scientists are taught that the minute you publish, that's research communication, you've already done it. And, you know, like Vivian is saying, it's a serious profession because as with scientists, you'll have lab techs. You know, you'll have people in the field. If you're doing climate research, you probably have somebody who studies using all the different tools to monitor the climate. So even for science communication, you know, we have graphic designers, we have digital people, and even in the digital space, you'll have somebody who's super well trained to deal with platforms like Hootsuite, TweetDeck, to be able to tweet, to be able to look at analysis in the back end, the analytics, to be able to tell you whether the tweet you sent, was it impactful, how many engagement or impressions. You know, we could get into too much detail in it, but it's a profession with different experts. I can't do everything, so that's why I showed you the team, and that team is different people who do science writing. You know, Vivian was talking about the policy briefs that they put together, the research brief, depending on the audience. So that's why for us, we're here to support the scientists. On your question about a scientist responding to everything on social media, I need to remind the scientists, maybe we've created too much vibrancy about science communication that now there'll be a mad rush to Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. But, you know, I think it's important to remember that we're not socialites. As much as we're saying, become engaged, you know, get on social media, you're not a socialite. We don't expect you to live 24 hours a day. You know, there's a beep on the phone and you're there responding to it. No, I mean, at the very bare minimum is we want you to be able to 1 to 3 times a week tweet something. I'm in Kenya. How did I know about Ghana having a genome sequence of the coronavirus? You know, because somebody tweeted about it. A scientist decided to tweet about their work. So we just encourage you to tweet. Don't feel too pressured to respond to every single Tom and Harry who's asking for something, unless for you feel that, as Emmanuel will tell you, for you it's all about brand building. Is this thing going to help in terms of getting to your end goal of reaching your audience? Emmanuel?
Thanks, Juliet. Just before Emmanuel speaks, I was raising my hand because I wanted to connect this question that I had planned to ask you about the steps one should take to revive a tarnished personal brand, because I liked what you said about socialites. So I'd like you to respond to that, but I wanted to add to what the two of you said, that what scientists need to be doing, and especially if you're starting to rise up and become an independent researcher, ensure that you have a communications budget so that you can hire people like Vivian, like Emmanuel, like Juliet, to support not just you, but also your institution, because the better you communicate what you're doing and the impact that you're having, the more you're able to convince even governments and other research funding bodies to give you money to continue doing your research. So Emmanuel, you can make, Juliet, you can respond to the question about tarnishing, reviving your brand if it has been tarnished, and then we go to Emmanuel.
Wow, that sounds like crisis communication to me. I mean, it's hard to respond to that question without understanding what exactly was tarnished about the brand. You know, was there some pseudoscience involved? If not, like with the case of the MMR vaccine in the UK back in the early 2000s, you know, a tarnished brand. So it's very important when you're faced with a crisis. I mean, I am a head of communications at an organization. So one of the things is you always want to protect brand, you know, the brand of an institution, the brand of an individual, and also the work that they're doing, which is the science that they're doing. If usually when crisis happens, the most important thing is to assess what the crisis is, right? And then from there, it allows you to be able to respond based on the crisis. But with this particular question of a tarnished brand, it would be interesting for somebody to sort of take a step back and assess what has been tarnished, you know, in terms of the brand. So the reason why I brought up the issue about the pseudoscience, in the case of that particular scientist, that, I mean, the research, I mean, unfortunately it was discovered much later, but the research was not factual. And then it resulted in the tarnishing of his brand as a scientist, and then subsequently his recognition was also removed. In such a case, it's really hard to have a comeback. But if we flip the coin the other way and say maybe he was on point, and maybe there was an issue there with the research, and he got some backlash, then it's always very important to be able to communicate. You communicate, 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 and you keep talking. Look at Facebook, for example. And I'm not saying that the Facebook founder was correct in terms of the elections, but he was submitted to the Congress in the US. He was asked questions. He was on media. As much as you can tell, he got a lot of PR training. That's not communication, that's PR. He was able to present himself such that his brand is not as much impacted. We can say that it is somewhat, but it's not as much impacted. So even as a scientist, if you're not in the wrong, it's very important for you to stay engaged, to communicate, create opportunities. If people allow you to go out and speak to the media, do that, clear the air, explain what it is, what was a misunderstanding, what was a misconception. I think when you don't do that, then you create more doubt. And then people begin to say, so it's actually true that, that scientist was a fake, or there was some pseudoscience involved. And we begin to see that with the vaccines right now for coronavirus. I mean, members of the public think it's a ploy. There's an anti-vaccine sort of myths and misconceptions going around in the continent. And that can seriously harm science because we need the vaccine, So it's very important for us to be able to engage and to communicate with members of the public. But Emmanuel is a brand person, so he needs to respond to that question.
Over to you, Emmanuel.
Okay, so I'm giving answer to some attendees with a private chat, and I want to say to the francophone that they can be comfortable to ask a question in French. Good, the francophone guy in the panel, and je leur donnerai la bonne réponse. Sentez-vous à l'aise de poser vos questions. Ne vous laissez pas intimider par les autres. Voilà. Sorry. On the issue developed by Juliet, I heard the terms crisis communication. Crisis communication, when we are in a situation of crisis, the first advice I can say to the scientists, don't think you are alone. You belong to an institution, you have some colleague, you have some partner, and sometimes, most of the time, you think you don't have the answer of a specific issue, but within the team, we can brainstorm and find somebody who's the right person that can give the right answer. So don't think you are alone. When we say follow be aligned with the policy of the institution or follow the process, is not to shut your mouth. No. It's to tell you that before you, there are a lot of persons that can give you support. We cannot, now I cannot say for this situation of crisis what we have to do. No. I cannot guess that. But the first thing, please share the information, and with all the members of the team, you can think about and yes, give the right answer.
Very many thanks to you, Emmanuel. We have 5 minutes remaining. So what I'm doing is identifying one key question for each one of you. So Vivian, this is for you from Annie. Would you say poor science communication is one of the reasons why science has not influenced decision-making in Africa? An example is much as we have had pandemics, guidelines normally will be formulated outside Africa. Over to you, Vivian. I can repeat the question. Would you say poor communication is one of the reasons why science has not influenced decision-making in Africa? And there's an example of pandemics being managed by guidelines from outside the continent.
It's definitely not the main reason. There could be other factors that contribute to it, but we can't ignore the fact that most of the time we are not sharing the information or the research that we have optimally. We are not being intentional about the work that we are doing and how exactly it can be able to influence some of these decisions that are being made out there. I think for the case of this pandemic, there could be other factors. For example, I've seen, you know, I've been seeing in the media some researchers talking about the way they had designed, how do you call them? The testing. Are they testing kits or what? A way to test for COVID. And I think they were saying they didn't have support within the country to be able to bring the idea at scale. So I would say that if we can improve on it, there are many other factors. Communication is just not the only one that is hindering how whether our research is going to influence decision making. Remember, you cannot just base decisions based on one single paper that you have. That is why you need to have an evidence base. And for the case of the study that I had shared earlier, for the case of Danlo with the orange flake sweet potato, when she started in 1991, she had to build that evidence base that it is not just her work that is showing this. You know, there has to be other scientists who are able to collaborate your findings. And when you communicate, then you are able to share with other researchers what you have found, and they in turn can be able to share what you have found. So when your evidence base is bigger, then I think you have a bigger chance of influencing decisions. And for the case of the climate change process, the UNFCCC, you will find that for that research, they will try to have regular discussion groups where they invite other scientists to bring their ideas, to bring their research together. Because when it's together, then there is synergy, and you can be able to see that this thing really has an impact. So it's just one of the factors, but there's a lot more that we need to do. That's what I would say. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Vivian. Emmanuel, let me ask you this last question before I go to Juliet. And this, again, it goes back to the social media questions we've been receiving. Just a minute, I don't know why my questions are disappearing from my screen. Again, scientists feeling that they are overwhelmed by all the social media platforms that we've been talking about this afternoon, and wondering how to balance their success on social media with their success in research, and if you can give them insights on how to balance that and how to ensure that one is not overriding on the other. And the other question which relates to that is whether scientists can handle the heat on social media platforms, because sometimes it is tough and rough. Over to you, Emmanuel.
Yes, it's something that comes regularly. It's true. Everybody is overwhelmed. And Juliet mentioned a point. We can plan to make a tweet 3 times per week. And keep in your mind that each time when you go to a conference like this one, for instance, you have to tweet something. When I finish to publish when I submit a publication and that is published, I can tweet about it. The balance is firstly a self-control. Even for us communicators, we struggle to get this self-control, but in our minds, at this time, I have to do that. Take the opportunity when the opportunity comes.
Thanks very much,
and the
Emmanuel.
opportunity of my work. Yes.
And in French, Emmanuel?
No. I was listing
Yeah, I don't
the
even want to say that
opportunity,
in
like
French. We would appreciate to have that in French as well, if you wish.
We were saying repeat that in French, what you just said about the opportunities.
the same answer in French.
Oui.
Ok. Donc, on pense qu'on sera submergé en allant vers les réseaux sociaux. Mais la première chose, c'est de développer un contrôle de soi, pouvoir se maîtriser soi-même, avoir des barrières. Je fais ça à tel moment, je fais ça à tel moment. Comment je saisis les opportunités comme les conférences, les publications, etc., pour diffuser un message. Vivian, do you understand what I say?
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. I understood a little bit. I won't try and translate, but I did. The very last question, because we are 2 minutes past the hour, and this goes to Juliet, and then I will wrap up the webinar. Another really thought-provoking question. This is from Lucy. Thank you for the good session. How would you advise scientists to tell the story of negative findings from research? Most scientists' journal papers focus only on hypotheses or research that has worked, although sometimes negative findings could be useful. Would be interested to hear your thoughts on that. Over to you, Juliet.
Wow. I mean, it's so unfortunate I can't hear the sound or the question being asked from the person who asked the question, because the question I would ask them is it that those negative findings or there was no results? So if you were testing, say, God willing, a treatment for coronavirus in September 2020, and you had a placebo, and you had this treatment for coronavirus, and you gave different groups, Group A and Group B, 100 people each, the vaccine treatment, the drug for coronavirus and the placebo, and you found that there was no difference, meaning that the drug does not work. So is the question that then how do you communicate that to members of the public? You need to remember that in that research, you have involved some participants. You've involved the public in your research. Your Group A and Group B were people who are participating in the research. So it's very important for them to know that, A, we did the research and we acknowledge that this drug has no effect, to treating coronavirus. So at all points in time, remember I said even during a crisis that you must communicate. It's the same thing. You have to communicate whether there's positive findings, whether there's negative findings, and whether there's no finding whatsoever, like we have found nothing. It's always very important to share the information that you get. It is fine. So I know scientists sometimes they want to shy away. Remember, even communicating just the process in itself of how you've gone about it is a form of communication, because not many people understand the research pathway. So if you can do that, you're also creating some awareness amongst the African public of what science is and how it's done and what it aims to achieve.
Wow, thank you very much, Juliet. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Thank you very much, Vivian. What a fantastic panel you have been. And especially responding to some of the questions we've had this afternoon. I think they've just been thought-provoking, and I want to thank the attendees for also being present and asking these questions, because they're very important in the work that they are doing. I think overall we have learned that there's much more to just publishing your paper or attending a conference. You need to actually budget for that. Some of the questions that we have not been able to respond to include, how do you budget for science communication if you're a researcher? There are some specific questions to AAS, such as having a community of scientists or sort of a database of science communicators. There was a question about the recording of this webinar and the presentations. We shall provide that on your emails in 24 hours. That's when you shall receive it in your emails. I want to end this webinar and thank you all for being part of this exciting session, and I hope we will see you in future webinars as panelists, as presenters to ask questions, because I think it's very important for early career researchers. The more you're able to do at this time to communicate your science, the better positioned you are out there to attract the right people to work with, to attract the right donors, but also to start having an impact in society. So I hope this session has been helpful to you. As usual, we encourage you to send in your questions or recommendations for any future webinars you'd like us to run as part of the mentoring platform. I'm trying to see if I can share my screen with you to show you 2 links on how you can engage with the African Academy of Sciences. If you'd like to know about our next webinars, sign up to our newsletter on the AAS website. If you go to the AAS website, just scroll down to the bottom and you'll see a sign up link to our newsletter. If you're another career researcher under the age of 40 and have finished your PhD in the last 5 to 10 years, we welcome you to apply for the affiliate scheme, and you will be able to benefit from the AAS mentoring scheme. Thank you very much to all of you, to our presenters. We hope you have enjoyed this as much as we have enjoyed here at AAS, and have a lovely afternoon, a lovely evening, wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Grace. Thanks.
Thanks, Juliet.